This is VK3CSJ in Narre Warren South. Please stand by for this morning's WIA broadcast at 9 a.m. on 1825 kHz in the 160 metre amateur radio band. This is VK3CSJ in Narre Warren South. Please stand by for this morning's WIA broadcast at 9 a.m. on 1825 kHz in the 160 metre amateur radio band. This is VK3CSJ in Narre Warren South. Please stand by for this morning's WIA broadcast at 9 a.m. on 1825 kHz in the 160 metre amateur radio band.
This national news edition originates from VK1 WIA and is rebroadcast throughout Australia and around the world under a common licence published on the WIA website. This WIA national news service is copyright to the Wireless Institute of Australia, and rebroadcast is authorised only under the provisions of that common licence. WIA Director and Company Secretary Peter Cleave, VK8ZZ.
From Australia, this is the Wireless Institute of Australia with the weekly news service. This broadcast is in text, audio and video and is accessed on wia.org.au.
In national news this week, WIA Director Peter Cleave, VK8ZZ, WIA RD Contest Manager and the last call for logs. With the dreadful news coming out of Papunka, a rural town some 320 kilometres northeast of Melbourne, of the ambushing of police and the ultimate slaying of two of them, it's even more poignant to try and work VI8POL on air 13 to 29 September. It concludes on National Police Remembrance Day, the 29th of September, a day dedicated to honouring and remembering police officers who have lost their lives in the line of duty. Again, that call sign, VI8POL. And that, of course, is put together by Paul VK5PAS. But wait, there's more, much, much more in this edition of news from the Wireless Institute of Australia for week commencing Sunday, August 31. I'm Editor Graham, VK4 Baker.
On demand, online, on YouTube, and on 270 centimetres FM across Australia. This is the Wireless Institute of Australia and VK1 WIA.
Last weekend, I attended the Tokyo Ham Fair. It was great to see several other Australian amateurs in attendance as well. The Tokyo event was a major drawcard for amateurs and non-amateurs alike. Official numbers for the event was around 40,000 people over the 2 days. Saturday was the official opening and the ribbon cutting of the Tokyo Ham Fair. This event was hosted by the Japan Amateur Radio League and was officiated by their president, who was also joined by representatives from IARU Region 3 in the ribbon cutting ceremony. The trade displays were amazing with the release of the new IC 7300 Mark II. That stand was very well attended and the new rig a major drawcard. All of their products were on display, including the IC 905 with the 24 GHz module and cutaway versions of the antenna on display. Not to be outdone, on display elsewhere was all of the variations of the FTX1 series of transceivers, as well as all of their mobiles, handhelds, and the very popular DR2X repeater. It was also a used equipment megafest. I must say that I managed to pick up a few bargains on the weekend myself. Saturday night was the official dinner and I attended representing the Wireless Institute of Australia. Most of the IARU Region 3 societies were present at that dinner. The Sunday saw huge numbers of amateurs also in attendance, and it was certainly well attended on the day. This has been WIA Director Peter Cleave, VK8ZZ, Japan Lima 1 Golf Bravo Italy and 9 Victor 1 Zulu Zulu signing off.
Bruce Kendall, VK3WL. 5 MHz denied VK radio amateurs in a deal. Claim debunked. A claim that the WIA, quote, made a deal, unquote, with the ACMA and Defence to deny, quote, all Australian amateurs access to the 5 MHz band, unquote, has been debunked by those very agencies. In February, an Australian amateur radio splinter group issued an unattributed news release with an elaborate narrative constructed to make the claim that, among other things, a quote, the WIA made a deal with the Defence and the ACMA which included denying all Australian amateurs access to the 5 MHz band, unquote. This allegation was reinforced in March in a weekly amateur radio broadcast from VK6ARN, when an announcer claimed the contents of the news release were, quote, true, verifiable, and that correspondence, unquote, exists in support. Seeking the facts, I wrote to the relevant ministers asking if there was any truth in the claims. The Minister for Defence referred my correspondence to the Minister for Communications, who asked the relevant department to reply. On 15 August, I received an official reply from the Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development, Communications, Sports and the Arts. Mr Andrew Irwin, an Assistant Secretary at the department, reiterates the official reasons why 5 MHz access for amateurs was not supported. It's about balancing, a quote, the existing use of the band against the impacts of introducing use by the amateur service, unquote, after considering public submissions. You can download this letter from a URL in the text version of this broadcast. Of significance is interdepartmental correspondence between the ACMA and the department I have seen, making it abundantly clear that there is, quote, no such evidence, unquote, that any deal took place between the ACMA, Defence and the WIA. Surely the amateur radio community and the WIA deserve both a retraction of the false allegations as well as a public apology from the discredited splinter group and VK6ARN. 73, Bruce Kendall, VK3WL.
From here, there and everywhere, you've tuned to the Wireless Institute of Australia's National News Service. We are VK1WIA. Now with international news, Jason, VK2LAW.
International news is with thanks to Amateur Radio Daily, ARRL, DX World, EHAM, Hackaday, IARU, IRTS, Newsline, NZART, RAC, RadioWorld.com, RSGB, SARL, and the worldwide sources of the WIA. Hello, leading this week's international news, AST Space Mobile, which has asked the FCC for permission to use the amateur radio frequencies for a planned constellation of satellites providing cellular-based broadband service, has announced it expects to have launched between 45 and 60 satellites by next year. The company said it plans satellite deployments every 1 to 2 months into 2026 and expects to begin providing service in the United States by the end of this year. In the first quarter of next year, the company hopes to begin rolling out service as well in Canada, the UK and Japan. In 2 separate deals pending, the company is planning to acquire use of portions of the S-band and L-band spectrums for global delivery of its services. AST Space Mobile, which is considered a rival to SpaceX, was recently approved to use the amateur radio band on an experimental basis for a low Earth orbit satellite, a prototype known as FM1. It was assigned the call sign Whiskey Papa 2 X-Ray Romeo X-Ray, which is valid through to the 1st of July 27. The company plans to use the 70-centimetre amateur frequencies to conduct telemetry, tracking and telecommand between ground stations and its satellites. The Malaysian Amateur Radio Transmitters Society, MARTS, has once again made history by sending an official delegation to participate in the Japan Amateur Radio League, JARL Hamfair 2025. MARTS President Mod Aris Benawi said the JARL Hamfair, the largest amateur radio exhibition in Asia, was held in Tokyo. He said MART's involvement in the exhibition highlights its important role in the international amateur radio community, in line with MARTS's slogan of providing service through radio. Still at the Japanese Hamfest, and exciting news last weekend, especially if you're into ICOM. Up first, there's a new ICOM IC7300 Mark II on the way. The IC7300 Mark II is a next-generation compact HF transceiver building on the worldwide success of the IC7300, which has already sold over 100,000 units globally. There's been no official price announcement from ICOM as yet. A couple of features of the IC7300 Mark II include lower heat generation and lower power consumption, along with an HDMI port. Up next was the ICOM ID5200, a successor to the popular ICOM ID5100. The ID 5200 is a versatile 144-430 MHz dual-band transceiver with support for both FM and DV digital voice modes. A key feature is its ability to perform simultaneous dual reception of FM to FM, FM to DV, and DV to DV signals. In India, officials are taking aim against the sale and marketing of handheld radios that they say violate consumer and telecommunications regulations. Yes, the authorities in India have announced a crackdown on the listing and sale of handheld transceivers from China that they say break laws governing consumer protection and the unauthorised use of radio frequencies. Stories in various Indian media outlets identify some of the 13 e-commerce sellers in question, such as Facebook, Amazon, Flipkart and IndiaMart, amongst others. The nation's Consumer Affairs Commissioner, Prahlad Joshi, said that the violations of the Indian Telegraph Act, the Wireless Telegraphy Act and rules governing the use of low and very low power short-range RF devices were being broken. Acting as an advocate for radio users, the West Bengal Radio Club secretary, Ambarish Nag Biswas, VU2JFA, told the Statesman website that users of these radio sets could interfere with police and other agencies' communications and gather sensitive information relating to national security. A big thank you to John, VK4JJW, for jumping in at short notice for me last time. For WIA National News in Sydney, I'm Jason, VK2LAW.
From here, there and everywhere, you've tuned to the Wireless Institute of Australia's National News Service. We are VK1WIA. Now, operational news with Felix, VK4FUQ.
Hello there. Alan, VK4SN, the Remembrance Day Contest Manager, reminded us last weekend that the logs for the RD must be received by 0300 hours Zulu, today August 31. Alan went on also to remind us.
Remember, for those who try to submit ADIF files, logs require conversion to Cabrillo format before submission is accepted. On vklogchecker.com there is a link to a converter designed by Peter, VK2PR, specifically for VK contests. This is the only converter that works for VK logs. Please do not email me ADIF, as there is nothing I can do with it.
Alara contest always the last full weekend of August, which means it's on now. One contestant, OM Jeb Smart, is really honouring Alara with his QDH for the contest. It seems in Elizabeth Hutchins, BK3HM, had the distinction of being the first wire licence as an amateur radio operator in the state of Victoria. Radio was in the family's genes. In the 1920s, her son Alan held the call sign BK3HL and her daughter Marjorie was licensed as BK3HQ. Some 100 years later, on the Kalawada land, where the family's old radio shack still stands, Jeb Smart, VK3 GCM, is putting amateur radio back into action. He chose his property, known as Byron Avon, as his QDH for the Australian Amateur Radio Ladies Association annual competition. Also this weekend sees the Worldwide Digi-DX contest. Yes, this year's edition of the Worldwide Digi-DX contest will take place 30-31 August, from 1200 hours UTC to 11:59 hours UTC. The objective for amateurs around the world is to contact as many other amateurs in as many Maidenhead grid locations as possible, using the FT4 and FT8 modes on 160, 80, 40, 20, 15 and 10 metres. West Lakes Cup, 13th of September, 8:30 p.m. until 9:30 p.m. local time. That's 10:30 to 11:30 UTC. Operation is phone on 80 and 40 metres, and all Australian stations may be worked. Everyone is invited to the 2025 Oceania DX Contest Party. The focus of the contest is on promoting HF contacts between stations in Oceania and the rest of the world. For operators outside this region, it's a chance to work many Oceania stations, from remote Pacific Islands to outback here in Australia and jungles of Indonesia. The SSB portion of the contest runs from 0600 hours UTC on Saturday, the 4th of October, to 0600 hours UTC on Sunday, the 5th of October 2025. CW operation runs from 0600 hours UTC on Saturday, the 11th of October to 0600 hours UTC on Sunday, the 12th of October 2025. 2025 is the 82nd birthday of the contest. It has become the signature event for operators across Oceania and around the world, combining DX excitement, technical capability and operating skills. Now the DX window to the world. VIA POL is on air 13 to 29 September. QSL is via VK5 PAS. More information on VIA POL can be found on QRZ.com. Once again, special call sign 482 MAX will be activated 1 to 31 August in remembrance of St. Maximilian Maria Kolbe. Activities on 86 metres, SSB, CW and digital. Born in 1894, Father Kolbe, SP3RN, was killed on 14 August 1941 at Auschwitz. QSL via LOTW, EQSL, QRZ logbook, or via EA5GL. Celebrating its 26th anniversary, the Route 66 special event will be on the air September 6 to 14. The event commemorates the history of the Mother Road, connecting east and west areas of the US, from Illinois to California. This year there will be 22 stations participating in their one-by-one call signs, W6A, W6B. Each station has its own schedule and is on the air as operators and bands allow. Not all stations will be on the air 24/7. A certificate and a call are available, but operators must work at least one station before either item can be requested, and it may take up to 10 weeks to process. The Route 66 special event is hosted by the Citrus Belt Amateur Radio Club. W6jbt.org. The RSGB Awards Manager has introduced a new awards series for amateur radio contacts with stations across all UK country and Crown dependency prefixes. The Worked All UK and Crown Dependency Prefixes Award offers several different subsets, with the rules varying slightly for each. The idea for this award was put forward as a way of encouraging or tapping into intra-UK activity as well as encouraging contact with UK amateurs. Get involved with this new award by going to rsgb.org/awards and selecting Worked All UK and Crown Dependency from the right-hand menu. You can find details of other awards offered by the RSGB using the same link. For WIA National News, I'm Felix VK4FUQ Inningham.
From here, there and everywhere, you tune to the Wireless Institute of Australia's National News Service. We are VK1WIA. Now, special interest group news with Bruce, VK3FFF.
And a very good day to you. Worldwide special interest groups Astronomy and Wireless Weather. With the retirement of NOAA 15, NOAA 18 and NOAA 19, the long-running POSE or Polar Orbiting Operational Environmental Satellite series has officially ended service. Some in the community worry this marks the end of easily accessible weather imagery. But the outlook for amateur reception remains bright. Russia's Meteor M satellites are now the mainstay for 137 MHz reception. Their LRPT signals are strong and reliable, and with additional Meteor M launches planned, service is expected to continue well into the 2040s. Higher resolution imagery is also available on the 1.7 GHz band for those with modest upgrades in equipment. The newly launched NASA ISRO Synthetic Aperture Radar NISAR satellite has successfully deployed a record-breaking 39-foot wide radar antenna in orbit, unfolding it like a blooming umbrella after weeks of careful preparation. Launched on July 30th from India's Satish Dhawan Space Centre, the satellite carries two powerful radar systems, L-band from NASA and S-band from ISRO, capable of penetrating clouds, vegetation and snow to track changes on Earth's surface. The massive gold-plated wire mesh reflector, weighing 142 pounds, was released through a carefully staged process involving joint-by-joint boom extension and the firing of explosive bolts. It took 4 days for the structure to fully extend before motors and cables pulled it into its final drum-like shape. NISA will provide three-dimensional, high-resolution images of Earth's land and ice, detecting surface shifts as small as fractions of an inch. By late fall, scientists expect the satellite to begin delivering transformative data, including 3D movies of environmental changes across the globe. Worldwide special interest groups, balloons. It's time to reach for the sky.
Hi, this is Mark, VK5QI, from the Amateur Radio Experimenters Group, AREG, here in Adelaide, South Australia. Coming up on Sunday the 7th of September will be AREG's 65th Project Horus high-altitude balloon launch. On this launch, we're going to take another attempt at flying our crossband repeater payload, which we were unable to fly in July. The aim of the flight being to get it high enough, about 35 kilometres altitude, to provide repeater coverage all the way from Adelaide to Melbourne. There's plenty of ways to get involved with the flight, including receiving our telemetry and imagery payloads and tracking the progress of the flight live online. All the details on the launch, including frequencies and repeater access information, are available on our website at areg.org.au. We hope to hear you via the repeater on the launch day. Good luck and happy tracking.
Thank you, Mark. VK5QI. Worldwide special interest groups, maritime. Lighthouses on the Air is lighting up again. OK, we know ILLW was held a few weeks back, but an event known as the Dutch Lighthouse Hunt will run all September, when members of the Dutch radio group will use 11 special call signs, each representing a different lighthouse in the Netherlands. All 11 have LOH as their suffix. And the Maritime Radio Historical Society in the United States, in cooperation with the Cipher History Museum, has arranged to transmit an Enigma message via the Maritime Radio Coast Station KPH near San Francisco. The transmission will take place on Saturday, the 30th of August at 2000 hours UTC. KPH listeners, intercept operators and codebreakers everywhere are invited to try their hand at receiving the transmission and decrypting the message. The CW frequencies are in kilohertz 425.0, 6477.5, 8642.0, 12808.5, 17016.8, and 22477.5. Upon completion of the CW transmissions, the broadcast will be repeated on the KPH RTTY frequencies at 2015 UTC. The RTTY transmission will be 170 CPS shift Bordeaux, 45 baud. The RTTY frequencies are in kilohertz 6324.5, 8427.0, and 12585.5. Worldwide special interest groups, radio amateur old-timers. It's time to head to the Apple Isle.
Hello everyone, this is Peter, VK7PD, reminding you that tomorrow is the first Monday of the month. Time for the Radio Amateurs Old Timers Club of Australia September Bulletin to go to air. This month, as well as the details of the upcoming luncheons in both Perth and Melbourne, we will offer an historical broadcast from years past by Alan Doble, VK3AMD, from February 2003. The usual news and information will be broadcast next month. Everyone, RAOTC members and non-members alike, is most welcome to listen to the program and join in the callbacks afterwards. Full details of all transmissions, times and modes can be found on the RAOTC website at www.raotc.org.au or just Google RAOTC broadcasts. If none of the transmission times suit you, you can download the audio file at any time from today from the club website. The Perth RAOTC luncheon is held on the second Tuesday of the month at a new venue, and full details are available on the RAOTC website. Once again, tune in tomorrow for the September RAOTC Bulletin. Enjoy the program and please join in the callbacks afterwards. 73 from Peter, VK7PD.
Worldwide special interest groups, Final Frontier. And the United States is racing to be the first nation to deploy a nuclear reactor on the lunar surface following new orders from acting NASA Administrator Sean Duffy. His directive calls for fast-tracking lunar nuclear power to stay ahead of China and Russia, who have announced joint plans to build a reactor by the mid-2030s. Duffy warned that if rivals succeed first, they could impose keep-out zones that would threaten US access and undermine the Artemis program, which aims to return astronauts to the moon in 2027. Worldwide special interest groups, Radio Amateur Young Timers, YOTA, Youngsters on the Air. And here's Alan, VK2COD.
Thank you, Bruce. The IARU Region 1 YOTA Summer Camp 2025 has started in Janville, France on 20 August. Youngsters from all over the world have arrived to attend the YOTA camp. They met new friends and attended the opening ceremony to officially start the camp. The first morning of the camp was full of lively ice-breaking games to have a fun way to get to know each other and begin the friendship building. This was followed by an interesting lecture on the amateur radio direction finding, delivered by Marja Yankee Uniform 3 Alpha Whiskey Alpha. After that, a group of 20 participants were selected to read questions to astronaut Mark Finke, KE5AIT, aboard the ISS. Since they had a short time window for the contact, they rehearsed the questions before the contact. When the moment arrived for the ISS contact, silence fell across the room, broken only by the static of a clear frequency. After a few calls, a voice came through. "Welcome to the ISS." Mark's greeting to the Yodas filled their hearts with joy. It was truly an emotional moment for all who participated. Other activities at the YOTA camp were soldering their own CW paddle, rocket building, and operating a station. Hopefully we can have our own YOTA camp here in VK in the future. Until then, thank you for the Fisher's Ghost Amateur Radio Club for establishing the VK YOTA contest. I'm looking forward to it in December. Find out more about the contest by going to the link in the text edition for our WIA news. For WIA National News, I'm Alan, VK2COD here in Sydney. Now back to you, Bruce.
Thanks, Alan. I'm Bruce, VK3FFF from sunny Bendigo.
Alrighty, time to check the social scene because it's a date. Now remember, clubs are welcome to email text with audio for this section. Just email it to nationalnews@wia.org.au. We're looking in September. September 13 is Sunfest at the BY Community Hall, 25 Peachester Road, 9:30 September 13. Right across VK, it's the WIA affiliated clubs briefing webinar. That's happening September 14, 4 till 5 p.m. In VK2, West Lakes Field Day, 8 a.m. October 26 on the club grounds. AREG's Amateur Radio and Electronics Sale, Sunday the 26th of October in VK5. For the whole of VK, it's the VKFF National Get-Together, October 24-27 in Canberra. QTech 2025 is a two-day conference, Saturday the 1st and Sunday the 2nd of November at the Kedron Wavell RSL in Queensland. And also in Queensland, VK4's Gold Coast Amateur Radio Society, their Hamfest November 9 at the Country Paradise Parklands. VK7 Miena Hamfest Saturday November 15, 10 a.m. Rosebud Radio Fest in VK3 at the Eastbourne Primary School Rosebud, November 16. Picton Hamfest November 23 at the Picton Showground, 8 a.m. In VK8, it's the Darwin Amateur Radio Club's Christmas Party, 6:30 p.m, December 3. And while we're talking about VK8, how about the people up there in VK8 get the weekly callbacks into Gordon so he can bring everything up to date? And then in 2026, it's the WIA AGM, May 2 p.m, Albury, in VK2. So now until next we meet, I'm Graham, VK4BB. Walk softly.
From Australia, this has been the Wireless Institute of Australia with the weekly news service. This broadcast is in text, audio and video and is accessed on wia.org.au.
Courtesy of Bevan, VK5BD's ATV and YouTube channel, this has been WIA National News. We're back now, live and local, and your voice, your callbacks. And don't forget, tick like.
Hello there, this is VK3OTN, the official station of the Radio Amateur Oldtimers Club of Australia, with a monthly news broadcast for members and friends of the club for September 2025. This month, instead of the usual broadcast, we will offer an historical broadcast from years past. I'm Andrew, the VK3 Charlie Alpha Hotel. This month we have an original broadcast from February 2003. Details on when to hear these news and information broadcasts are available at the club website www.raotc.org.au. The VK3OTN is available on a wide range of radio platforms, HF, VHF and UHF, T-meter repeaters, amateur television, DMR, that is digital mobile radio, and D-Star. These news broadcasts are available for download for up to 6 months, just in case you miss the original news broadcast from the RAOTC website. If you'd like to contact the club, then why not send us an email, raotc@raotc.org.au. The upcoming September luncheon and hybrid AGM will be held on September 18 at the Caulfield RSL here in Melbourne. It will be a 2-course meal at a cost of $36 per head. Tea, coffee and hot chocolate will be included. Soft drinks, beer, wine and other drinks can be purchased from the bar. Details will be published in OTN and are available on the club's website www.rotc.org.au. If you see it on Instagram, X or Facebook, check with the details with the club's website or in the September OTN. Luncheon speaker Peter Wolfenden, VK3RV, the WIA historian, will present an illustrated talk titled Wireless in the Sky about early Australian airborne wireless activity. Peter will talk about some interesting and significant amateur radio history unknown to most of us from almost 100 years ago. It includes associations with early aeronautical wireless communication experiments, together with the various techniques employed at the time. It provides a glance back at a few significant amateurs who contributed to the establishment of the first known wireless communication stations at Essendon Airfield, with the consequent involvement with an air race across Australia which attracted international entries. He'll also talk about the RAAF Wireless Reserve that formally came into existence about that time. It was an initiative of the WIA. Perth Luncheons. The popular and well-attended monthly luncheon for RAOTC members and friends in and around Perth are held on the second Tuesday of each month. The 7 Mile Bar and Bistro is at 501 Wanneroo Road, Balcatta. Their website can easily be found by Googling 7 Mile Bar and Bistro. In addition to the main menu, a seniors menu is also available. There is ample parking available in the adjacent car park. The venue is located on Wanneroo Road near the Reed Highway intersection and is readily accessible with car parking available. Since Wanneroo Road is a main thoroughfare for the northern suburbs, public transport via bus is also a viable alternative. The appropriate route and timetable information can be accessed from the Transperth website. A copy of the URL is located on our website. Alasdair, VK6ATX, is coordinating the lunch, and it would be appreciated if Alasdair could be notified of those planning to attend to ensure that adequate seating is provided. We look forward to seeing many of you at the August ROTC luncheon. Alasdair's email address is vk6kif@bigpond.com. I'll repeat that. Victor Kilo 6 Kilo India Foxtrot at bigpond.com. Now let's hand the microphone over to Alan, VK3 AMD.
This is Alan Doble, VK3 AMD and associated relay stations, transmitting as VK3OTN, the official call sign of the Radio Amateur Old-Timers Club Australia Incorporated. We begin this month's news and information session for members and friends. News about the club from our president, Bill Roper, VK3BR. And here he comes.
Hello there. At the 2002 annual general meeting of the Radio Amateurs Old-Timers Club Australia Incorporated, the resignation of Alan Doble, VK3AMD, from the position of president was reluctantly accepted. Alan had been president for 7 years, the longest serving president in the 28-year history of the club. I'm sure that all members will join with me in thanking Alan for the tremendous contribution he made to the club as president. He is going to be a hard act to follow. Fortunately for the RAOTC, however, Alan's experience and knowledge will not be lost to the club, as he will remain a member of the committee as vice president. Effectively, Alan and I have swapped jobs. And of course, Alan will continue as the RAOTC broadcast officer, producing and presenting the very interesting and informative monthly news and information sessions. The club was incorporated in 2002, which, amongst many other things, brought about a change of name from the Radio Amateurs Old-Timers Club to the Radio Amateurs Old-Timers Club Australia Incorporated. As such, a new club logo has had to be designed, and the committee will decide at their February meeting whether to adopt this new logo. However, one thing will not change. We will continue to use the familiar abbreviation RAOTC to refer to the club rather than RAOTCA Inc. or RAOTCAI or whatever. The Radio Amateurs Old-Timers Club Australia Incorporated, which is affiliated with the Federal WIA and the VK2 division of the WIA, was founded 28 years ago, with the objective to maintain interest and good fellowship among those who qualify for membership. Full membership is available to all persons who have been qualified to hold an amateur license for a minimum of 25 years, and associate membership is available to all persons who have been qualified to hold an amateur license for a minimum of 10 years. At present, the club has a membership of 448, which includes 28 associate members. In the past few years, membership has been gradually growing, but we need more members. You can help the RAOTC by signing up a new member. As you know, fees are very low, only $8 per year. And quite apart from the usual fellowship benefits, members also receive 2 copies of the interesting magazine OTN each year. If you need a membership application form to sign up a new recruit, you can obtain one by contacting the club secretary, Arthur Evans, VK3VQ, on 03 9598 4262, or myself, Bill Roper, VK3BR, on 03 9584 9512. However, by far the fastest and most efficient way to obtain a membership application form is to email me at wroper@optusnet.com.au. Again, wroper@optusnet, optusnet.com.au. And I will email you an application form in the Adobe Acrobat PDF format. Incidentally, if you do not have a copy of Adobe Acrobat Reader on your computer, this program is available as a free download from the Adobe website or on the CDs that come with most computer magazines on sale in Australia. Looking through our membership database, it is interesting to note how few female amateurs are members of the RAOTC. Why is that? How can we recruit more female amateurs into membership? What are your thoughts on this matter? That's just one of the items that your RAOTC committee will be discussing at their next meeting in mid-February. Also on the agenda of that meeting is the continuing development of an RAOTC webpage, and whether the membership fee, which has remained at $8 per annum for many years, needs to be slightly increased. A report on the discussions of this committee meeting will be included in next month's RAOTC news and information session. Until then, have a great time with this wonderful hobby of ours, amateur radio. 73 from Bill Roper, VK3BR, President.
Thank you, Bill. This is VK3OTN. Here in Melbourne, our next luncheon will be held as usual at the Bentley Club in Ewell Street, Bentley. The date is Tuesday, March the 11th. Lunch will start at 1 o'clock and will cost the same as the last 2 or 3 occasions. That's $27.50, including refreshments. Thank you, Bill. By courtesy of the Defence Force School of Signals, we'll have a very interesting talk on modern communication nodes used by the Defence Forces. The speaker will be Warrant Officer 1, Chris Tubman, a senior instructor at the school. This is VK3OTN. The news from other states is from VK6, Clem Patchett, VK6CW and VK6OTN, advised that old-timers will meet for lunch at the Bayswater Tavern tomorrow week, Tuesday the 12th of March at 12 noon. Attendance of 20 is hoped for. And Ray Dean, VK5RK, reports that preliminary notice that the group's annual Anzac Day reunion will be held at the Marion Hotel on Tuesday, April the 15th. That's a little bit ahead of us, but a very important date for South Australian members to put in their diaries right now. Ron Fisher, 3ON, has provided a copy of the Hong Kong newspaper South China Morning Post, dated August the 27th last year. It devotes 2/3 of a page to discussion of Murphy's Law, which we've all referred to many times without knowing its origin, perhaps. If it can go wrong, it will. Buttered toast falling on the floor, buttered side down, is quoted as an example and was investigated by an English scientist who persuaded 1,000 school children to drop slices of toast 20,000, repeat 20,000 times. Result, the butter hit the floor 63% of the time. This was explained by the fact that usually the piece of toast did not have enough time to turn right over. Now back to Murphy, who was a US Air Force engineer who in 1949 at Edwards Air Force Base in California set up an intricate set of tests of the effects of rapid deceleration. After several apparently ideal tests, he found that the monitor recording the test was wrongly wired. This led Murphy to conclude that in engineering design you have to build in the assumption that something will go wrong. Ironically, Murphy became the victim of his own law. The press got hold of the story and he's been remembered not for his engineering laws, but for a humorous folklore. Thought you'd like to know, and thank you, Ron, for the loan of the South China Morning Post. This is VK3OTN. From a diseased estate, we have a faded document dated 1927 and headed International Radio Telephone Procedure, and in part it reads, in spelling out call signs, service abbreviations and words for spelling the following well-known names must be used. A. Amsterdam, B. Baltimore, C. Canada, D. Denmark, E. Eddystone, F. Francisco, G. Gibraltar, H. Hanover, I. Italy, J. Jerusalem, K. Kimberley, L. Liverpool, M. Madagascar, N. Neuchâtel, O. Ontario, P. Portugal, Q. Quebec, R. Rivoli, S. Santiago, T. Tokyo, U. Uruguay, V. Victoria, W. Washington, Y. Xantippe, X is Xantippe, Y. Yokohama, and Z. Zululand. It sounds cumbersome, doesn't it? Perhaps operators had more time to talk 75 years ago. A note attached says that this format was still in use for commercial operator exams in 1932. This is VK3ATN. Stephen Phillips, VK3JY, joined the club last year. He sent us a short story of his involvement in amateur radio, and here's what he says. Having recently become a member of the RAOTC Australia, I started to think how I became involved in amateur radio all those years ago. My first exposure was sparked in the 1950s as a young boy when an old-time friend of my father and now fellow club member Col Harvey, VK1AU, let me speak to a contact he was having with an American on, and he knew what atoll in the mid-South Pacific. From that day on, I was hooked. Being young and broke, all I could do in those days was gather copious numbers of radio and hobbies magazines and its subsequent transformations over the years. I was always fascinated with the writings of the late Neville Williams and the author of the column From the Serviceman Who Tells. The technical knowledge of both these people and their journalistic style kept me spellbound. My first ARRL handbook was in 1959 and I still treasure it. Years rolled by, and with study, marriage, family, more study, plus work, I was unable to pursue my interest for a while. However, in 1977, with the help of Ray Lesky, VK3AB, who drummed theory into my head, I became VK3YEZ. The following year, I passed the CW exam by being tested by the postmaster at the Horsham Post Office. This kindly old gentleman must have been one of the few remaining postmasters with telegraphy qualifications. On the night of the exam, I presented myself at the side door of the post office and was made to feel comfortable by my examiner sitting down with a key and suggesting we have a practice session first to calm my nerves. We did a bit of sending and receiving over about a 15-minute period with a few jokes thrown in, and I thought the exam was not going to be as bad as I thought it would be. At the end of the practice, the nice old postmaster announced I'd passed. We had joined to the hostelry next door to celebrate. How times have changed. I must admit I've not been active for the last 10 years or so. However, now I am retired, I've rekindled the spark in more ways than one and am rediscovering the joys of CW again. Even if I can manage at the moment, there's only 10 words per minute. Looking at a list of RAOTC members, I feel to be an august company. Thank you for the opportunity of membership and the participation in club activities. It's a nice letter, isn't it? And interesting how people get involved. This is VK3AMD and associated relay stations is VK3OTN for the Radio Amateur Old-Timers Club. And we have here a very interesting item from Wesley Philpott, who had the call sign VK3EZ for a while pre-war, and it's 3YN for a while post-war. He also held a first-class commercial certificate. The story is headed, My Reminiscences, I'm suffering today, aren't I? My Reminiscences in the Respect of Wireless Communications. This is VK3OTN. My first introduction to wireless was in 1924 when one of my uncles let me hear music from a pair of headphones laying in a bowl of some sort. I've never forgotten it. This was in England. But when we arrived in Australia in 1926, it was very rare to find a wireless, and those that did exist were crude TRF receivers, usually with a separate tuning condenser for each 1, 2, or 3 tuned circuits. Bell filaments heaters were supplied with DC and lead-acid accumulators, and the local motor garage usually made quite an income from the charging of what was usually 2-volt batteries. My father purchased a wireless set from a man who was obviously a backyarder, which if you stuck your ear to the horn of the speaker did imitate the very weak sound of music. We lived in Kyabram, about 100 miles from Melbourne, so the waves had a long way to come. It was very unsatisfactory despite the great length of wire hanging up outside. I think it was in about 1929 that AWA produced a real wireless. It was a Radiola 45E. We were the first in town with one, and if it was turned up, you could hear it outside. It had 3 tune stages, the 227s and a triode output 245. Power supply rectifier at 280. Can't remember what the detector was. The speaker was a big 10-inch, and its field was excited by using the field winding as a power filter choke with 2 very wet electrolytics. I think it was basically at this time I became fascinated by the art, but being only 10 years old, there was nothing I could do except tune around when there was nobody at home to see if there were other stations. I did hear foreign voices at the high end and Morse code at the low end, and if Father had caught me doing this, it would have been Goodnight Wesley. I think it was about 1931 when we moved to East Kew, Strathalbyn Street. Dad had purchased a bakery business there, and my sister fiancée gave her a crystal set, and this recreated my interest in wireless. Before long, I'd begged, borrowed, and stolen a detector, which I think was named Red Diamond, a cardboard tube wound with copper wire having a straight strip exposing the copper, allowing a brass contact to be positioned and in contact with the windings was all that was necessary. I can remember hearing on Sunday mornings amateur stations playing music. I think the one I heard quite often was VK3FW. I believe to be Bill Fulton. His trademark seemed to be tapping on his microphone with a pencil. Apparently there was a special dispensation for approved amateurs to operate Sunday mornings. I have a very faint recollection that a VK3AK became a commercial station known as the Akron Fire Station, the VK3ATN. I found that connecting an aerial to one side of a buzzer contact, I could send Morse and receive it strongly on my crystal set. Unfortunately, neighbours complained bitterly that all the stations they wanted to listen to had a beep beep on them. A big break came when someone gave me 4 old battery valves. I think they were B406s. At the same time, I received a battery eliminator. I was on my way. Marconi, eat your heart out. The borrowed AWL handbook described a transmitter referred to as a TPTG, and using, that's a tune plate tune good of course, and using one of the B406s, I soon had a contraption on a bit of wood that made a P-lamp glow when coupled to the tank with a loop. Oh, how wonderful. No one who's not done this the hard way will know just what the fascination was. Next, the information, probably from the same AWL handbook, the carbon microphone hooked via a loop coupled to the tank coil will modulate the carrier. But I had no microphone. A red gum block with a rectangular recess cut into the face, 2 brass screws with their heads protruding from the recess at the back of the block, a sheet of thin mica stuck at the front, and a piece of charcoal pounded into fine particles, and the resulting fine granules were poured into the recess. It worked, but sounded bloody terrible, and obviously some improvement was essential. I still had 2 B406s left, one as a preamp and one as a modulation stage. An old shape as a modulation inductance, and hey presto, speech sounded good on my old crystal set, but something had to be done about a receiver. Kids didn't have money in those days, and I was no exception, so a B406 as a regenerative receiver was it. Most people today would be amazed to hear the signals were copied on this toy, and at that time a relatively clean spectrum. By this time, I became friends with with a couple of other young banders who were also interested as I was. We made plans, and to cut a long story short, one night I switched on the rig and started calling. At the same time I was fiddling with the aerial link to the tank. Remember, it was a TPTG. When I went to receive and started the search somewhere on 80 metres, I heard a weak voice saying, "Yes, I can hear you, but for Pete's sake, stay on the one spot." I was a pirate at the time. I had a lot of fun with my crew gear, like hiding the mic behind the piano and going to a mate's place to listen to the family's conversation. It was at times very enlightening. Next to where we lived above the shop was a motor garage. Saturdays were ST bookie days. I should mention here that one of the naughty things I used to do was connecting my transmitter to the output of our broadcast receiver and walking around the vicinity with a matchbox crystal receiver and headphones. Reception was excellent within about 200 yards. I mentioned to the SP bookie that I could get the race results, and he bet me 5 shillings I couldn't. I won the 5 shillings. Because of my exposed location, I was cunning enough to realise that my antenna could be seen plainly from the lane. I remedied this very early when I became illegal by using very fine wire for the antenna, the sort of wire that P&G earphones were wound with, and I'm admitting nothing. This was invisible unless you were aware of where to look, but it did annoy me by breaking often. This is VK3OTN. From here, the illegal transmissions flourished, and we were on nearly every night, and I won't mention the call signs used, but all good things come to an end. One night, my lunch brother arrived at my place, puffing through his background and gasped, "The RIs have got Bert and Frank. Get rid of your gear." Well, the gear went over the next door's fence, and I waited in fear, but no RIs arrived. Bert and Frank had refused to tell them my address, and they both copped a 30 shilling fine and their gear confiscated. That pained us a bit, and it was decided if we wanted to continue, amateur qualification was essential. I was a working apprentice about 16 and 17 years of age and did find it possible to scrape up enough money to purchase a few bits and pieces. First, a Jones Super Gainer, courtesy of the ORL handbook, and I thought this a wonderful little receiver. Its squeaking regeneration gave it enormous gain, but it did radiate with no RF stage. I obtained my license, was issued the call sign VK3EZ. I started with a 6L6G crystal oscillator and stuck with CW for a while. Then I rang Bright Star to order a crystal, and the man, I can't remember his name, said, "Yeah, I've heard your note and didn't think it'd be long before you wanted crystal control." It wasn't long before I followed the gang with the NATO 7PA 6B6 buffer, 6B6 cathode modulated by a pair of 6V6s with a D104 mic. My brother and I joined the 2nd Division Signals Militia Unit at the outbreak of war and went into training camp at Broadmeadows. It didn't take long for me to decide that I knew more than the instructors, so I transferred to the RAAF and was accepted as Group 1 Sergeant and a wireless electrical mechanic, serving first the 22 Squadron in Richmond, 10th Squadron UK, 46 Squadron Pembroke Dock, 463 Squadron in Driffield, and I served a total of 6 years, 4 months with the RAAF. I'll continue this story, and away we go. This is VK3OTN. Subsequent to discharge and some jobs of soul searching, I commenced duty as a senior technician at the P&G Research Laboratories and was employed in the design and manufacture of equipment to be used for Baths Bay between Mount Oberon on Wilson Promontory and Mount Stanley in Tasmania. We camped at Wilson Promontory and carried equipment to the top of Oberon on our backs, including motor generators, erected the mast and yogis, and set up tents to commence transmission. It started to blow, and we arrived at the top to see the mast come down and one tent flying down the valley. But the job get done, and the only signal dropout I recall was during a display of the Aurora Australis, and this was not for very long. But the heavy work took a toll on me, and I was hospitalised for a hernia operation. It was light duties for a while, and then I was seconded to the Mont Park Monitor Station as an operating monitor. At this time I was qualified for 25 bursts per minute Morse. And a friend goes on to say, "I've lost count of time," and I lost what's the time too. And he goes on, "I lost count of time, but I spent a few years there and qualified as a radio inspector. The Mont Park eventually became far too noisy, and I was given the job of investigating suitable sites with a view of rebuilding the monitoring station. Scrammed some hydrogen balloons from the Willie Bureau and used them to lift vertical wires instead of having to erect expensive masts. They did their job, and a site on the hill of South Morang was approved and the building carried out. Continued there, monitoring frequency and measuring frequency under the officer in charge, who at the time was Alf Bemmard. But I did break out in a sweat when one balloon broke away, dragging 100 feet of antenna wire and drifted west toward the high-tension transmission lines at the bottom of the hill. Lucky for me, it gracefully rose and cleared the lines by at least 100 feet. If I could see myself doing a stretch for that one, it would have been spectacular, as I believe the line carried 200 kilovolts. This is Alan Dave on VK3AMD and associated relay stations as VK3OTN, the official call sign of the Radio Amateur Old Timers Club. We're about to conclude our transmission for this month and hope that your listeners have found it interesting. This is VK3OTN closing this transmission.
It's customary to end each broadcast with a short or humorous story, so here's this month's offering entitled 3 Little Pigs. A farmer had 3 female pigs. Times were hard, so he decided to take them to the county fair and sell them. At the fair, he met another farmer who owned 3 male pigs. After talking a bit, they decided to breed the pigs and split everything 50-50. The farmers lived 60 miles apart, so they agreed to drive 30 miles each and find a field in which to let the pigs spend time with each other. The first morning, the farmer with the female pigs got up at 5 a.m, loaded the pigs into the family station wagon, which was the only vehicle he had, and drove the 30 miles. While the pigs were busy, he asked the other farmer, "How will I know if they're pregnant?" The other farmer replied, "If they're lying in the grass tomorrow morning, they're pregnant. If they're in the mud, they're not." The next morning, the pigs were rolling in the mud, so he hosed them off, loaded them into the family station wagon, and then they proceeded to try again. This continued each morning for the best part of a week. Both farmers were worn out. The next morning, he was too tired to get out of bed, so he called to his wife, "Honey, please look outside and tell me whether the pigs are in the mud or in the grass." "Neither," yelled the wife. "They're in the station wagon, and one of them is honking on the horn." Lucky pigs, I guess.
You have been listening to VK3OTN. VK3OTN is the official station of the Radio Amateurs Old Timers Club, Australia. This concludes this month's News and Information Bulletin. The next RAOTC News and Information broadcast will take place on the first Monday of next month, on the same frequencies, and at the same times as today, with the exception of January. Thanks for being with us, and we hope you will join in the callbacks, where callbacks are taken. 73 everyone.